Hello again. It's very important that what I say today is not misunderstood. If anyone has any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. Early in 1967, a patient on the list at Fulham was consulting me once a week after surgery hours to discuss his problems. He worked in the music business. One day I found he had left a large joint on my desk when I got back from unlocking the door to let him out. I had, of course, heard much about this drug, but like all doctors, I knew absolutely nothing about it. I thought it preposterous that teenagers should know more about a drug than the medical profession, but a window of opportunity had opened. I realized that the only way to understand cannabis was to smoke the joint. After thinking about it for a week, I did, alone and analytically, in the quiet of my room. Before lighting up, I systematically relaxed, as I had learned as a teenager. I then found that the effect of cannabis was to intensify the degree of relaxation far beyond anything I had previously experienced, leaving my mind free to wander transcendently. This effect was aborted if I got up to make myself a cup of coffee, but returned as soon as I relaxed again. This suggested that cannabis was a very important drug, and that failure to relax into it accounted for the fact that many said it had no effect on them. With the experience of hypnosis that I had had, I quickly concluded that cannabis had a similar effect on the mind to hypnosis. This meant that it increased suggestibility. That is to say, it would make people accept ideas that were contrary to those they had previously held. Moreover, they would accept suggestions that went against their better natures, if given a plausible reason for doing so. Thoughts and emotions behave like germs. For example, ideas get picked up, panic spreads through a crowd, laughter is infectious. It was therefore not necessary to actually smoke cannabis to be influenced by it. One could talk of passive cannabis smoking. Indeed, smokers themselves talk of the contact high. The permissive society was born. Cannabis was the catalyst for the Cultural Revolution. Those closest to this revolution will remember the little red book with its thoughts of Chairman Mao. Socialism, intellectual and revolutionary, became the panacea ideology of the post-war generations worldwide. It was not long before I suspected that the increased suggestibility produced by smoking cannabis was being used as a chemical weapon to brainwash youth. To distract them from what was being done behind their backs, the post-war generation, the largest new generation in human history, was being encouraged to indulge themselves. If it feels good, do it. They became so busy doing things that felt good that they never thought about the consequences. They were also encouraged to reject as old-fashioned the timeless values of their parents and grandparents. They then continued indulging themselves and rejecting wisdom into adult life. I would submit that this lies at the root of the ecological crisis. There was nobody with whom I could discuss my concerns. Family doctors were too busy negotiating the hoops and hurdles of the National Health Service, and specialists were engrossed in the details of their specialty. Moreover, hypnosis is not exactly the longest suit in modern medicine. I thus found myself totally isolated on what can only be described as the psychological front line of the Cold War. I had stumbled on rather more than a puff of smoke. Under the circumstances, I kept my concerns to myself. However, it was important that I monitored the situation. But cannabis was totally illegal, and it was also important that I remained within the spirit of the law. This problem was resolved by an American student and his wife, with whom I'd become acquainted. He pointed out that it would be legal for me to prescribe tincture of cannabis, BPC, an old clinical form of the drug. A check with the Home Office confirmed this was so. In those days, doctors set great store by clinical freedom, and I decided to exploit it. Accordingly, I started prescribing the tincture and became famous or infamous overnight, depending on which way you look at it. At first, I only prescribed to heroin addicts and found that it bucked them up no end. Later in 1967, and to ensure that I only prescribed to those already familiar with the drug, I only saw people the American referred to me. Then I prescribed to people who'd been referred by those to whom I had already prescribed. In this way, I found myself writing prescriptions for coteries of friends who all had considerable experience of cannabis. I thus quickly made the acquaintance of a broad section of London society. The majority seemed to be abusing the drug to party and feel good rather than using it to meditate. The notion that the workers, as a majority, were an elite with a divine right to rule was dominating political philosophy. My suspicions that cannabis was being exploited as a chemical weapon in the revolutionary struggle was increasingly confirmed. This covert and subversive abuse would have been impossible had the drug been legal. It was for this reason that I spoke in favour of legalisation in the first live television debate on the subject in 1967. It was a BBC programme called Your Witness, chaired by Ludwig Kennedy. Dr. R.D. Laing and Jonathan Aiken spoke with me for legalisation, and Leon Britton and two of his cronies against. While unable to express my true concerns, Leon Britton asked if I thought the drug should be legalised even if a serious side effect was discovered. He asked in the convoluted language of a lawyer, hoping to confuse a witness, and succeeded. The programme was going out live and time was running out. Though flustered, I asked him calmly to repeat the question, and then simply replied yes. After all, had the drug been legalised, it would have put an end to its abuse for political subversion. There was a general shuffling in studio seats. When it came to a vote, the studio jury was evenly divided for and against legalisation. Bye-bye just now.